The control room of the Fleet Command was never quiet, but that morning it carried a different kind of noise. Screens glowed with maps and moving lines. Radios hummed with low voices. Officers moved with purpose, yet a sense of confidence filled the air, the kind that comes from years of success and habit. This was the nerve center of power, and everyone inside believed they knew how things were supposed to go. At the center of it all stood the Admiral. His uniform was pressed sharp, his medals heavy on his chest. He had commanded ships longer than many of the officers had been alive. Wars had changed, technology had changed, but he had remained. To most people in the room, his word was final. When he spoke, others listened. When he decided, others followed. A new operation briefing was about to begin. It was meant to be routine, just another show of strength in uneasy waters. The Admiral looked over the room, hands behind his back, calm and certain. He had already reviewed the plan. It followed proven patterns. It was safe. It was familiar. One of the aides stepped forward and cleared their throat. "Sir, before we proceed, command integration is complete. The remote commander is now patched in." The Admiral nodded without interest. About time. The screen at the front of the room shifted. Instead of maps, a simple identifier appeared. No face, no rank title spelled out in full. Just a call sign, Iron Widow. For a moment, there was silence. Then a few quiet chuckles broke out. Someone near the back raised an eyebrow. Another officer leaned toward a colleague and whispered something that ended with a smirk. The Admiral laughed openly. It was not cruel, but it was dismissive. "Iron Widow," he repeated. "Is this a warship or a stage play?" More laughter followed, cautious but real. The Admiral waved a hand as if brushing away a fly. "Who assigns these names?" he said. "I was expecting a commander, not a ghost story." The screen remained unchanged. The call sign did not flicker or react. If the person on the other end heard the laughter, there was no sign of it. A calm voice finally came through the speakers. Clear, steady, not rushed, not defensive. "Command acknowledged," the voice said. "I am online." The room quieted, though the mood remained light. The Admiral tilted his head, amused. "Well then," he said, "welcome to the operation. I trust you've reviewed the plan." "Yes," the voice replied. "In full and The Admiral asked, already sure of the answer. There was a short pause. "I have concerns." That word alone shifted something in the air. A few officers glanced at each other. The Admiral's smile faded just slightly. "Concerns?" he repeated. "Care to explain?" "Certain assumptions in the approach may not hold," the voice said. "Weather patterns, regional movement, and response timing suggest higher risk than projected." The Admiral let out a breath through his nose. "We've run this scenario many times," he said. "The models are solid." "I understand," the voice replied. "The data I'm referencing is newer." Someone near the table shook their head quietly. Another officer tapped a pen, annoyed. The Admiral straightened. "Commander," he said, stressing the word, "this operation follows standard fleet doctrine. We are not reinventing the sea today." "I am not suggesting reinvention," the voice answered. "Only adjustment." That did it. The Admiral turned away from the screen and addressed the room. "You see," he said, "this is what happens when distance replaces presence. Everyone wants to adjust. No one wants to execute." Few officers nodded. The voice on the line did not interrupt. The Admiral turned back. "Your input is noted," he said, already moving on. "We'll proceed as planned." "Yes, sir," the voice replied. No argument. No pushback. The screen switched back to maps. The briefing continued. Ship positions were outlined. Timelines were confirmed. Orders were reviewed and approved. Confidence returned to the room like a warm coat. But far from that command center, in a quiet, secured space with no audience and no laughter, the Iron Widow listened. She sat alone, surrounded by screens of her own. Her posture was straight, her expression unreadable. She had expected the reaction. The name always caused it. That was part of its purpose. Her hands moved smoothly as she pulled up more data. Weather feeds, signal delays, Fuel consumption reports. Crew readiness notes that most people skimmed and forgot. She did not skim. She never had. Years earlier, she had learned what happened when warnings were ignored back then. She had still believed that rank alone earned attention, that good analysis spoke for itself. She had been wrong. The call sign Iron Widow had not been chosen for drama. It had been given after a mission that went bad in quiet ways first. Small mistakes, overconfidence, a refusal to listen. By the time the danger was clear, it was too late. She had survived. Others had not, including the one person who had always trusted her judgment without question. After that, she stopped trying to sound impressive. She focused on being correct. Now, as the fleet moved into position, she noted a pattern forming on one of her screens. It was subtle, easy to dismiss. Exactly the kind of thing that got people hurt. She tagged it, logged it, cross-checked it. Back in the command room, the Admiral concluded the briefing. "We move on schedule," he said. "I want clean execution. No surprises." The officers dispersed, energized and assured. Only one screen in one quiet room showed a different future taking shape. The Iron Widow leaned forward slightly. "Noted," she said softly to herself, recording a private log. "Risk remains unaddressed." She did not raise her voice. She did not demand attention. She prepared because she knew something the Admiral did. Not confidence does not stop consequences, and laughter does not change reality. The morning after the briefing, the fleet moved into position under the Admiral's command. From the bridge of the lead ship, officers watched as vessels cut through the calm sea, each following the precise path assigned in the plan. The sun had barely risen, and yet tension was thick. Not the obvious tension of imminent battle, but the quiet edge that came from knowing mistakes had weight in the command room. The Admiral reviewed communications from each ship. He tapped at his tablet, nodded at reports, and occasionally gave short orders. He believed in routine, predictability. Plans made on paper were reliable. That confidence made him steady in the eyes of his officers. They trusted it. He trusted it. And yet, in quiet corners of the room, a few young officers exchanged uneasy glances. There was something they couldn't name. Something subtle in the way the operation felt different from previous exercises. The Iron Widow was also awake with the dawn. Watching the fleet from a remote operations center, she had run simulations all night, checking each step against conditions that often went unnoticed. Her eyes moved quickly across multiple screens, noting subtle deviations, currents slightly stronger than predicted. Signals slightly delayed, communications lagging in small but important ways. None of these were alarming by themselves, but together they formed a pattern that made her lips press into a thin line. She pulled up the trajectory paths of the ships. One vessel, slightly smaller than the others, was drifting toward a zone that had not been flagged as risky in the original plan. She cross-checked with the weather feed. Winds were shifting. Waves higher than expected. She tapped her headset. Command. "This is Iron Widow. I recommend adjusting the northern flank by 3 degrees and delaying the second wave by 5 minutes. There was a pause. Then a voice came through, slightly skeptical. "That isn't necessary. The plan accounts for minor variations." "Understood," she said. Her tone did not change. "I am logging the recommendation for review, but current projections suggest the risk of collision or exposure is higher than standard tolerances." The line went quiet. She left it open and continued scanning the data. She knew her warning might be ignored, as it often was in the early stages of operations. Officers were trained to execute. They were trained to trust protocol. Warnings that came from unexpected sources, even accurate ones, were often dismissed. Experience had taught her patience. Back on the lead ship, the Admiral walked past the navigation stations, inspecting reports, checking devices, nodding at his officers. "Everything in order," he said, more to himself than anyone else. The officers around him nodded, relieved. They knew he was watching. They knew he had seen thousands of operations, and they trusted him to spot any mistake before it became critical. Still, the Iron Widow's note remained in the secure log. It was quiet. No alarms. No dramatic warnings. Just careful notation and suggested action. She understood that preparation often spoke louder than shouting. Being calm, precise, and observant was more effective than forcing attention. As the fleet moved deeper into the zone, small problems began to appear. A communication delay. A minor navigation error. Nothing catastrophic. The officers on the ships brushed them off. "Systems will self-correct," someone said. No need for panic. The Iron Widow saw the connection between the small errors. One misstep led to another. The environmental shifts combined with the slightly misaligned path could create a vulnerable opening. She traced it across her screens, following the pattern like a thread through fabric. If ignored, it could place the ships in range of unseen hazards or create delays that the operation could not recover from. She prepared a detailed report and sent it to the fleet command. It was short, factual, and unassuming. She included calculations, possible outcomes, and recommended corrections. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic, just facts. When the Admiral received it, he skimmed it quickly. "Minor adjustments," he muttered. "Not worth changing plans for?" He handed it back to an aide. "Proceed as scheduled. Don't let a remote operator slow us down." The Iron Widow knew the response would be like this. Her work was not about immediate recognition. It was about foresight. Quietly, she prepared contingency measures. Alternative routes, emergency protocols, and crew reassignments if needed. Every option she prepared silently, almost invisibly, ready to be implemented the moment it became necessary. Hours passed. The fleet advanced further into the operational area. The sun climbed higher, reflecting off the water. Officers grew relaxed, joking quietly among themselves, confident that the day would go exactly as planned. The Admiral moved among them with the assurance of a man who had seen every danger and survived. Then, the first real sign of trouble appeared. A sensor picked up irregular readings. Nothing dramatic, but enough to cause attention. A minor engine delay on one of the smaller ships caused it to fall slightly behind schedule. Alone, this was negligible. Together with the drift and wind changes, it created a potential exposure. The officers in the room debated it briefly. "It will correct itself," one said. No need to alert command. The Iron Widow had already anticipated this. She activated a series of alerts on her systems, tracking each vessel carefully, monitoring adjustments, ready to issue her orders if the window closed. Her hands moved over the console with practiced ease, marking data points and running projections that the officers in the room had not even considered. The Admiral, unaware of the full scope, continued observing the fleet's progress. He was calm, confident, smiling at reports from officers who confirmed that the plan was being followed. The officers mirrored his confidence. "Proud to be part of a well-executed operation." The Iron Widow's voice came quietly over the secure line. "Command, northern flank deviation is increasing. Recommend immediate minor adjustments." "Noted," came the reply, neutral but dismissive. "Proceed with original plan." She did not argue. Instead, she shifted to monitoring contingency systems, emergency maneuver patterns, backup communications, alternate formations, all ready to execute if needed, every possibility accounted for, every risk mitigated silently, without disturbing the routine that everyone else relied upon. Time passed. A second irregularity appeared. Navigation delays compounded. A sensor flagged a minor but unusual energy reading near one of the vessels. Officers on board reported it casually. "Probably an anomaly," one said. "Nothing to worry about." But the Iron Widow traced the anomaly across data feeds. It connected with previous irregularities. The small deviations she had noted hours earlier were combining in ways that could jeopardize the entire operation. She calculated outcomes rapidly, running through hundreds of simulations in seconds. Each one pointed to a potential disaster unless adjustments were made immediately. Her calm voice over the secure line continued, quiet but firm. "Immediate realignment recommended. Northern flank and secondary vessels need correction within 10 minutes. The response from the Admiral came again, calm, unshaken. "Not necessary." Maintain current positions. Updates acknowledged. She did not escalate, did not demand attention. She continued to prepare her interventions, ready to act the moment the operation crossed the line from safe to dangerous. Her hands moved quickly, typing orders that would only execute if the automated protocols confirmed that human intervention was required. She was patient. She had learned patience from mistakes, from losses, from silence. The morning wore on. Officers chatted, moved, and executed commands, confident that everything was under control. The Admiral remained at the center of the room, calm, authoritative, unaware of the growing risk that his confidence had overlooked. He believed in the plan. He believed in his years of experience. And for a long moment, it seemed that confidence would hold. Yet, beyond the Admiral's view, the Iron Widow's systems tracked a series of cascading problems. Small, almost invisible shifts in ship positions, wind, and timing. The kind of details that could not be sensed in person, only through careful observation and calculation. She monitored each variable, noting where adjustments would be required, mapping out how minor delays could become serious obstacles if ignored. She made no sudden moves. She spoke to no one unnecessarily. She waited, alert, ready. Her presence was felt only through the precision of her planning and the quiet assurance that someone was seeing what others could not. As noon approached, the first real test of her foresight loomed. Minor deviations continued, adding up. The fleet's southern vessels encountered stronger currents than predicted. Their timing was off, exposing them in ways that the original plan had not accounted for. Officers on those ships communicated the issue back to the lead ship. The Admiral noted it casually. "Adjust on the next sweep," he said, confident the correction would be simple. The Iron Widow's hand hovered over the console. She was ready. She had prepared for every minor deviation and every potential escalation. Every scenario she had calculated in simulations had been accounted for. And now, her interventions would be necessary to prevent mistakes from becoming disasters. She waited for the precise moment, calm, focused, and ready to act. The fleet continued to move, the sun now high in the sky. Officers joked. The Admiral smiled. And yet, unseen by all, the Iron Widow prepared quietly, assuring that even in the face of overconfidence and dismissal, no error would go unaddressed. She had learned to trust her analysis, her preparation, and her patience. And she knew that one day, that trust would be tested in ways the fleet could not yet imagine. By early afternoon, the fleet had entered the more challenging part of the operational area. The sea was no longer calm. Waves rolled higher, and currents shifted unpredictably. Officers on the ships adjusted with practiced skill. But even the most experienced noticed the subtle differences that came with changing conditions. The Admiral, confident as ever, believed these were minor variations. Well, within the range of standard operations, in the command room, he walked among the officers, approving reports and checking on progress. "Everything is within acceptable parameters," he said, voice steady. A few nodded, relieved that their careful planning seemed validated. Everyone in the room trusted him. Their confidence was contagious. They did not yet realize that the situation was quietly moving beyond their expectations. The Iron Widow was watching all of it unfold from her remote operations center. She had spent hours tracking each vessel's position, speed, and alignment with precision. Her attention to detail was unmatched, her focus unshakable. She noticed that one vessel, which had already deviated slightly, was now moving toward an area that could expose it to environmental hazards. Alone, the deviation might have seemed insignificant. Combined with the currents and wind shifts, it could be disastrous. She reviewed contingency protocols she had set up hours before. Emergency maneuvers, alternate routes, and communication reroutes were all ready. She ran simulations silently, projecting each possible outcome. Each scenario confirmed her concern. If the current pattern persisted, one of the smaller vessels could be at serious risk within the hour. She picked up the secure line again. "Command, there is an increased risk of vessel exposure in the northern quadrant. Recommend corrective maneuvers immediately." The reply came, calm, dismissive. Noted, continue as planned. She did not argue. She understood how these situations unfolded. Her role was to be ready, to act when necessary. She began activating her contingency measures silently, ensuring that the moment intervention became critical. She could move faster than anyone else. Minutes passed. Officers on the fleet's lead ship began to notice minor delays. A sensor flagged an unusual energy reading. A navigation system reported slightly off-track coordinates. They exchanged brief glances, shrugged, and reported back to the Admiral, who simply noted them and moved on. In his experience, minor anomalies often corrected themselves. Confidence, he believed, prevented panic and maintained order. The Iron Widow tracked each anomaly carefully. She saw the pattern forming. Small deviations combined with the unaccounted environmental changes created a window of vulnerability. She had anticipated this. Her hands moved over the controls, ready to implement emergency commands if required. Every calculation had been considered, every risk accounted for. Then, first vessel in the northern quadrant reported a problem. The engine system experienced a minor delay, which alone would have been manageable. But combined with previous deviations, it was enough to create a dangerous gap in the fleet's formation. Officers aboard the ship followed protocol, trying to adjust manually. Yet the gap persisted, widening incrementally with each wave and current shift. The Admiral received the report. "Adjust during next sweep," he said confidently, unconcerned by the magnitude of the deviation. His experience told him that minor gaps corrected themselves with routine maneuvering. He believed in the stability of his planning. The officers, trusting him, continued execution without questioning. The Iron Widow did not wait. She activated an automated sequence she had prepared. Communications rerouted. Minor course corrections calculated and ready. She began monitoring the vessel's position closely, anticipating every movement. If the Admiral did not respond in time, her system would step in, preventing disaster before it could unfold. Meanwhile, on the lead ship, the Admiral walked past navigation stations. Speaking briefly with officers, "Maintain positions. Continue execution. We are on track." His calm demeanor reassured those around him. The fleet, moving as one, relied on his experience. Confidence remained high in the command room, even as subtle signs of strain appeared elsewhere. Back in her remote center, the Iron Widow observed another shift. Wind patterns had altered slightly, pushing a smaller vessel closer to a rocky zone. The deviation was still minor, but the risk was rising. She ran rapid simulations, calculating every possible outcome, adjusting for currents, wind, and vessel speed. She identified the precise moment when intervention would be required. The secure line buzzed. "Command, Northern vessel requires immediate course correction to prevent exposure. Recommending authorization for automated adjustment." Reply, calm and authoritative, came again, "Not necessary. Continue with original plan." She accepted it, prepared, and continued monitoring. Every possibility was ready. Contingency protocols fully aligned. Her mind focused on calculation and observation, not on frustration or confrontation. Years of experience had taught her the value of patience and precision over confrontation. An hour later, the deviation became more pronounced. The smaller vessel's path intersected with stronger currents than anticipated. Officers aboard attempted manual corrections, but the adjustments were too slow to counter the natural forces. Other vessels began reporting minor collisions with waves, affecting speed and alignment. The fleet's formation, once orderly, was beginning to fray. The Admiral still believed the situation was under control. He watched screens, nodded at reports, and issued standard instructions. "Keep formation. Adjust on the next sweep," he said, confident. His authority and calm presence reassured the officers. They continued their tasks, trusting in his judgment. The Iron Widow had anticipated this exact moment. She activated her contingency protocols fully. Emergency maneuvers engaged. Automatic course adjustments calculated and ready. Communication pathways rerouted to ensure all vessels could receive instructions without delay. She did not announce her actions. She simply prepared to act the instant it became critical. Suddenly, a larger deviation occurred. The northern vessel, now significantly off course, faced direct exposure to strong currents. Minor misalignments elsewhere compounded the problem. Officers aboard the lead ship received the alert. Panic was not widespread, but concern was evident. Some whispered to each other. "This shouldn't happen," one said. The Admiral, sensing minor irregularities, remained calm. He did not yet perceive the growing threat. Experience told him that anomalies often corrected themselves. Routine execution and confidence were the pillars of stability. The Iron Widow did not wait. She implemented the automated corrections she had prepared. Instructions flowed to the vessel, adjusting course in real time. Communications routed seamlessly. Emergency maneuvers executed flawlessly. The gap began to close, stability slowly returning. Officers on the ships noticed the change, but did not understand its origin. The adjustment seemed almost instinctive, precise, and timely. Confidence returned gradually. The northern vessel corrected its path, avoiding the dangerous currents and realigning with the fleet. Officers breathed a sigh of relief. The crisis seemed to have passed. Though the exact cause of the correction remained unknown to most, the Admiral, reviewing the results, felt reassured. The operation continued smoothly. Reports indicated that the minor deviations had been corrected and that the fleet was back on track. He gave orders to proceed as planned. Confidence remained in the command room, bolstered by the apparent resolution of the problem. Meanwhile, in her remote operations center, the Iron Widow monitored the aftermath. She observed small adjustments settling into place and the fleet's alignment stabilizing. Her work was unseen, but the results were clear. She had intervened precisely when required, preventing a minor risk from escalating into a critical failure. She leaned back in her chair, calm and focused, knowing that her preparation had made the difference. She did not seek recognition. Her satisfaction came from knowing the fleet remained safe, the operation continued, and the potential disaster had been avoided. The sun began to tilt toward the horizon. Casting long shadows across the deck of the ships, officers continued their duties, reassured by the apparent smoothness of the operation. The Admiral, proud of the execution, moved among them, confident and assured. The Iron Widow's interventions remained invisible, quiet and precise. A hidden safeguard against mistakes that pride and routine might overlook. As evening approached, she logged every detail. Every adjustment, every anomaly, every decision. Her record was meticulous, precise, and complete. It would serve as a reference for future operations and a record of her silent vigilance. She remained calm, focused, and ready, knowing that the fleet's safety often depended on unseen hands, quiet judgment, and the patience to wait for the right moment to act. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the fleet as it continued its operation. But beneath the apparent calm, tension still lingered. On the lead ship, the Admiral reviewed reports, each confirming that the fleet was realigning and that no further incidents had occurred. Officers around him appeared relaxed, joking quietly and sharing small stories from previous missions. The atmosphere seemed normal, almost serene. But the Iron Widow knew otherwise. From her remote operations center, she continued monitoring the fleet. Each ship's systems, every environmental shift, and all communication signals were still under her watchful eye. She could see how close the northern vessel had come to a dangerous zone, and how minor deviations elsewhere could easily cascade into critical problems if ignored. While the Admiral believed the crisis had passed, she knew vigilance had to remain constant. Success often relied on attention to what others overlooked. She recalled the events that had led to her call sign, the Iron Widow. Years earlier, a mission had gone wrong, not because of equipment failure or bad luck, but because leaders ignored small warnings and over-relied on protocol. She had seen colleagues injured and a close partner lost. The experience had left a mark, one that hardened her determination without making her bitter. She learned to trust preparation over assumptions, observation over ego. Now, As she watched the fleet navigate the choppy waters, she traced patterns that indicated subtle risk. Currents shifted slightly. Small vessels lagged behind schedule, and communication signals flickered intermittently. Alone, these might have seemed inconsequential. Together, they created a potential window for error that could threaten the operation's success. She ran projections on multiple screens, each one showing the exact moment when minor issues could escalate into critical ones. The Admiral, still confident, called for a check-in with the northern vessel. "How are we holding?" he asked. The response came calm but slightly strained. "Minor adjustments needed, sir. All other systems stable." The Admiral waved a hand dismissively. "Good. Keep monitoring. We are on course." He turned to his officers, smiling, as if to reassure them that the day's challenges were routine. Confidence had always been contagious in his command room. The Iron Widow's hands moved quickly across her console. She monitored alternate scenarios, prepared emergency communication channels, and had backup navigation commands ready to deploy. She did not announce her interventions unless they were necessary. She understood that silent, precise action often mattered more than orders shouted across the fleet. As the fleet moved deeper into the operational zone, the wind began to pick up. Small waves became larger, creating minor turbulence that affected smaller vessels more noticeably. Officers aboard those ships reported slight deviations, but again the Admiral remained calm, assuming that small corrections would suffice. He relied on his experience and the assumption that fleets corrected themselves over time. The Iron Widow saw a different picture. She mapped the deviations and predicted where they would converge. The smaller vessels would soon face the compounded effects of wind, current, and delayed timing. Left uncorrected, even a minor error could escalate quickly. She activated a series of automated adjustments she had designed earlier, routing commands directly to the affected ships. The interventions were subtle but effective, maintaining alignment and stability. Meanwhile, back on the lead ship, a group of officers had begun to notice that the northern vessel's adjustments seemed unusually precise. They murmured among themselves. "It's almost as if someone is anticipating the next move," one said. Another nodded quietly, but said nothing, unsure of how to interpret the unexpected efficiency. The Admiral noticed their whispers and smiled, assuming it was the crew simply performing exceptionally well under routine guidance. But the Iron Widow had more than just routine adjustments ready. She anticipated that environmental conditions could change unpredictably. She had already prepared secondary measures for heavier winds, stronger currents, and unexpected delays. Each scenario was linked to real-time data, allowing her to implement corrections instantly. Patience and foresight had become her tools, precision and preparation, her weapons. Late afternoon shifted into evening. The sun lowered, casting long reflections across the water, and the fleet entered a particularly narrow passage. Currents strengthened, waves grew larger, and the smaller vessels were especially vulnerable. Officers aboard reported minor issues, noting that alignment was becoming challenging. The Admiral reviewed the reports and concluded that the situation remained under control. Confidence remained high in the command room. The Iron Widow, however, did not trust appearances. She traced each vessel's position and calculated the impact of the currents and wave shifts. Her analysis indicated that without immediate intervention, one of the vessels could be pushed dangerously close to submerged hazards. She double-checked her emergency protocols, ensuring that the moment action became necessary, commands would execute flawlessly. Then, one of the smaller vessels reported a sudden difficulty in maintaining course. The officers aboard attempted manual corrections, but environmental forces worked against them. The gap between vessels widened, creating a potential hazard. In the command room, the Admiral noticed the report but interpreted it as routine adjustments. Believing the crew would manage as expected, the Iron Widow was ready. She initiated her contingency plan. Automated navigation corrections were deployed, communication signals rerouted to ensure proper reception, and backup maneuvers executed simultaneously. The vessel corrected its course, realigning with the fleet, avoiding potential danger. Officers aboard noticed the swift resolution, yet none could determine how it had been accomplished with such precision. The Admiral remained unaware that the intervention had come from her. He continued to direct operations, believing that the fleet's smooth adjustments were a natural result of routine execution. Confidence in his command remained intact, as did the trust of those around him. The officers exchanged glances, quietly acknowledging that something extraordinary had occurred, though they could not yet explain it. After the incident, the Iron Widow continued to monitor the fleet. Environmental conditions were changing rapidly as evening approached, and she ensured that her systems were ready for the next potential deviation. Every vessel's position, every communication signal, and every environmental factor were under careful observation. Preparation, she knew, was the difference between success and failure. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her past experiences. She remembered missions where overconfidence and dismissal of warnings had cost lives. Those memories strengthened her resolve. She had learned that authority and experience alone could not prevent mistakes. Vigilance, foresight, and careful intervention were essential. She would not allow history to repeat itself. The fleet continued moving through the narrow passage, the sun now low, waves reflecting its fading light. Officers worked efficiently, unaware that the precision of their actions was supported by a presence they could not see. The Admiral remained confident, his leadership unquestioned. Yet unknowing of the quiet guardian ensuring the safety of every vessel, as night approached, the Iron Widow logged every adjustment, every intervention, every observation. Her records were meticulous, a testament to her focus and patience. She had acted silently, without seeking recognition, ensuring that the fleet remained safe and the operation continued smoothly. The sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving the fleet in twilight. Officers prepared for night operations, unaware of how narrowly they had avoided potential danger. The Admiral issued final orders for the day, confident that everything had gone according to plan. The Iron Widow watched, calm, prepared, and ready for any challenge that might arise. Her vigilance had once again prevented a crisis, demonstrating that unseen preparation and quiet action often mattered. More than recognition or rank, the night fell heavily over the fleet. With the horizon dark and the stars barely visible through the thin clouds, the operation was approaching its most critical phase. Officers aboard each ship worked carefully, following orders and maintaining positions. Their confidence was high, reassured by the smooth progress of the day and the calm demeanor of the Admiral stood on the bridge of the lead ship. Reviewing reports and communicating with officers across the fleet, each report indicated that operations were progressing without incident. He moved confidently among the crew, issuing instructions with the authority he had earned over decades. His experience had guided countless missions, and he trusted it fully. The officers around him reflected that trust, their confidence feeding off his calm presence. Yet, the Iron Widow was still vigilant. She monitored the fleet from her remote operations center, her eyes scanning multiple screens with precision. Small anomalies were appearing again, minor deviations in the path of the smaller vessels. Subtle fluctuations in the wind and currents that were slightly stronger than predicted. Alone, these issues might have gone unnoticed. Together, they could create a dangerous situation if left unaddressed. She ran simulations quickly, calculating multiple outcomes and preparing intervention plans. Her hands moved across the console, adjusting automated systems and aligning communication channels to ensure rapid responses. She was ready to act immediately if necessary, though her goal remained prevention rather than reaction. Experience had taught her that timing was everything. Intervene too early and others might panic. Intervene too late and disaster could strike. The Admiral received another report from the northern vessel. "All systems stable, sir," the officer aboard reported. "Minor alignment adjustments ongoing." The Admiral nodded, smiling slightly. "Good. Maintain vigilance, but no changes needed. Proceed as planned." He turned to his staff, reinforcing the calm that had carried them through the day. Confidence and routine, he believed, were the keys to successful operations. The Iron Widow observed the northern vessel carefully. The minor deviations reported were only the surface. Beneath them, the vessel's path was still slightly off, drifting closer to submerged hazards. She activated her contingency protocols quietly, initiating small course corrections that would not alarm the crew but would maintain safety. Her actions were invisible, seamless, precise. Hours passed. The fleet moved deeper into challenging waters. Waves grew larger, winds picked up, and currents became less predictable. Officers aboard each ship adjusted continuously, following standard procedures and relying on their training. The Admiral remained composed, confident that his experience and planning would guide the fleet safely. Suddenly, a significant deviation appeared. A smaller vessel, affected by currents and minor errors in navigation, moved dangerously close to a rocky zone. Officers aboard noticed the drift and attempted manual correction, but the waves worked against them. Panic began to rise quietly, though the Admiral remained calm. Believing that routine corrections would suffice, the Iron Widow sprang into action. Her automated systems engaged, routing precise adjustments directly to the vessel. Communication channels ensured that the ship received instructions instantly, aligning it safely with the fleet. The adjustments were subtle, yet effective, stabilizing the vessel and preventing disaster. Officers aboard the ship noticed the sudden correction, impressed, but unsure of its origin. The Admiral, observing the fleet's status, assumed the correction was the result of careful crew effort and the normal execution of the plan. Confidence remained high in the command room, and the officers continued their tasks, unaware of the unseen hand that had ensured the fleet's safety. Meanwhile, the Iron Widow reviewed the remaining vessels. Minor deviations persisted, and environmental factors continued to challenge navigation. She prepared additional corrections, each carefully calculated and ready for instant deployment. Her focus was unwavering, her attention to detail absolute. She understood that a single misstep in these conditions could escalate quickly, and she refused to allow that risk to materialize. As midnight approached, the final phase of the operation began. The fleet needed to pass through a particularly narrow and hazardous section of the waterway. Currents were strong, waves unpredictable, and visibility limited. Officers aboard each ship worked diligently, following orders and adjusting for conditions. The Admiral remained confident, believing that the careful planning and experience of the day would carry them through safely. The Iron Widow anticipated the challenges of this section. She monitored each vessel's position, speed, and alignment, predicting where minor deviations could combine into serious risks. Her contingency measures were ready, from automated course adjustments to rerouted communication channels. She did not announce her actions, knowing that calm execution was more effective than attention-seeking intervention. As the fleet entered the narrow section, small errors began to accumulate. A minor misalignment in one vessel affected others nearby, creating a subtle but increasing risk. Officers aboard the lead ship reported the deviations, but the Admiral remained calm. He assumed the corrections would take care of themselves and that the crew's training would maintain stability. The Iron Widow acted. Her automated systems executed precise adjustments across multiple vessels, correcting minor errors before they could escalate. The northern vessel, previously at risk, aligned perfectly with the fleet. Communication systems ensured that all ships received the necessary updates instantly. The fleet moved through the narrow passage safely, without incident. Officers on board noticed the smooth navigation, impressed by the apparent efficiency. But none understood the invisible calculations that had prevented disaster. The Admiral, reviewing reports, remained confident. "Excellent work," he said, addressing his officers. "The fleet has maintained position and alignment perfectly. Continue as planned." He did not realize that the Iron Widow's interventions had been the key factor in their success. After the passage, the fleet continued on course. The Iron Widow monitored each ship, ensuring that the remaining sections of the operation remained safe. She logged every adjustment, every anomaly, and every intervention. Her records were meticulous, complete account of the silent measures that had safeguarded the fleet. As dawn approached, the operation concluded successfully. The fleet reached its destination without incident, each vessel intact and aligned. Officers on board reported the smooth execution, impressed by the precision and efficiency of the entire operation. The Admiral addressed the fleet, praising the crew and reinforcing confidence in the plans and training that had guided them in her remote operations center. The Iron Widow allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She did not seek recognition, awards, or praise. Her fulfillment came from knowing that preparation, vigilance, and precise action had prevented potential disaster. The fleet had moved safely through difficult conditions, guided in part by a presence that remained unseen but essential. The Admiral, unaware of the true scope of her contribution, had learned little directly from the night's events. He praised routine, planning, and experience, not knowing that unseen observation and careful intervention had ensured safety. Officers exchanged quiet glances, some sensing the subtle influence of a skilled hand they could not identify. The Iron Widow continued her work, reviewing the operation in detail, noting each adjustment and intervention for future reference. She had prevented disaster without fanfare, ensuring that the fleet's mission succeeded. Her role remained quiet but essential, her vigilance unbroken, and her focus absolute. The sun rose fully, illuminating the fleet and casting reflections on the water. The officers continued their duties, confident in the operation's success. The Admiral maintained his authority and composure, proud of his command, and in a quiet center far from the surface, the Iron Widow prepared for the next challenge. A silent guardian whose presence ensured that experience, preparation, and careful observation triumphed over risk and oversight. The fleet had survived the night not by luck, but by the steady, unseen hand of a commander who had learned that vigilance, patience, and precision often mattered more than rank, recognition, or pride.